The hum of an air compressor filled Owen Bennett's garage as he wiped the sweat from his brow with the back of his grease-stained hand. The shop was quiet, except for the occasional clink of tools and the low murmur of a radio in the corner. For Owen, this was peace. A well-oiled machine, be it a car, a bicycle, or a lawnmower, was like a puzzle he could solve, one tangible way to make a difference in someone's day. His garage wasn't flashy. The sign out front, Bennett's Repairs, was hand-painted and faded from years of sunlight, yet everyone in Maplewood knew where to find him when things went wrong. To many, Owen wasn't just a mechanic, he was a lifeline, always willing to lend a hand regardless of whether someone could pay. That morning, as the autumn sun rose over Maplewood, Owen watched from the garage as Angela Grant stepped out of her house. Her small frame carried a quiet weariness, and she stared at the hood of her aging Cobalt sedan with the kind of dread Owen recognized immediately. Trouble with the car, he murmured to himself, setting down his wrench. He'd seen Angela around a hard-working single mother, who often walked her 2 kids to school, her head held high even when life seemed to weigh her down. Sure enough, Angela's 8-year-old daughter, Mia, peeked out of the house, her pink backpack slung haphazardly over her shoulder. Owen smiled faintly as the girl wrinkled her nose at the car and asked something he couldn't hear. Angela's weak attempt at a smile told him everything. By the time Angela closed the hood with a resigned sigh and started toward the garage, Owen was already waiting by the open bay, wiping his hands on a rag. "Morning, Angela," he said, his deep voice carrying a warmth that put people at ease. Angela hesitated at the entrance, clutching her keys tightly. "Morning, Owen. My car won't start. I was hoping you could take a look." "Of course," Owen replied without missing a beat. "Bring it over and I'll see what I can do." Angela shifted uncomfortably. "I'd push it over if I could, but it's completely dead." And she glanced at the ground, her voice dropping. "I'm not sure if I can afford repairs right now. Things have been tight lately." Owen studied her for a moment, noting the tension in her shoulders and the faint tremor in her voice. Then he smiled, his eyes crinkling at the corners. "Don't worry about that. Sometimes a good deed is worth more than a paycheck. Let's get you taken care of." Angela blinked, her relief palpable. "Thank you," she whispered. "Go on and get back to your day," Owen said gently. "I'll come by later to let you know what I find." Owen's inspection of the sedan confirmed what he'd suspected: it needed more than just a quick fix. The alternator was shot, and the battery wasn't far behind. Normally, repairs like these would cost a pretty penny, but Owen wasn't about to let Angela stress over it. He rummaged through his shelves, pulling out a refurbished alternator he'd set aside from a previous job. It wasn't new, but it worked perfectly. By mid-afternoon, he had the car running like a charm. As he worked, Owen thought about why he did what he did. It wasn't about recognition or even gratitude, it was about knowing that someone could breathe a little easier because of his help. He'd been there himself once, long ago, when a stranger had shown him kindness he'd never forgotten. Later that day, he knocked on Angela's door, keys in hand. "All set," he said when she opened the door, her face lighting up with hope. "She'll run just fine now." Angela's eyes widened. "Owen, how much do I owe you?" He held up a hand. "Consider it taken care of. Just promise me one thing: pay it forward when you get the chance." Tears glistened in Angela's eyes as she nodded. "Thank you," she said, her voice thick with emotion. Owen tipped his cap and headed back to the garage, satisfied that he'd done the right thing. What he didn't know was that his simple act of kindness would soon draw the attention of someone who could change his life as profoundly as he'd just changed Angela's. The morning after Owen repaired Angela's car, the scent of freshly baked muffins wafted through the garage as he adjusted the timing belt on an old pickup. Angela appeared at the entrance, holding a neatly wrapped basket tied with a bright yellow ribbon. "What's this?" Owen asked, straightening up and wiping his hands on a grease-streaked towel. "A thank you," Angela said, smiling shyly. "I know you didn't ask for anything, but I couldn't let your kindness go unanswered." Owen chuckled, a low and warm sound. You didn't have to do that, but I won't say no to muffins. Thank you, Angela. As Angela turned to leave, another car pulled into the lot. Owen raised an eyebrow at the sleek, black luxury sedan, a stark contrast to the usual beat-up trucks and sedans he worked on. The driver's side door opened, and a tall man stepped out, dressed in a crisp navy suit that looked out of place against the backdrop of Owen's modest garage. "Morning," the man said, his voice smooth but friendly. "You must be Owen." "I am," Owen replied, folding his arms. "What can I do for you?" The man extended a hand. "Jacob Peterson. I'm visiting Maplewood for a few weeks on business. I heard about your shop and thought I'd stop by. My car is overdue for some work." Owen shook his hand firmly. "I'll take a look. Pop the hood and tell me what's been giving you trouble." As Owen inspected the car, Jacob leaned casually against the garage wall, observing the space. He noticed the mismatched tools, the shelves cluttered with salvaged parts, and the faded photos pinned to a corkboard snapshots of Owen with smiling families, kids on bicycles, and even a few dogs sitting proudly beside newly repaired lawnmowers. "You do a lot for this town, don't you?" Jacob remarked. Owen shrugged without looking up. "I fix what I can. Keeps folks moving." Jacob's curiosity deepened. "Do you ever charge for all of it? Or do you just let people pay when they can?" Owen glanced up, his expression unreadable. "Depends on the situation. Not everyone can afford to keep their cars running, but that doesn't mean they don't need them." Jacob nodded, impressed. "That's rare. Most people would turn someone away if they couldn't pay." Owen smirked faintly, returning his focus to the car. "Maybe, but I figure kindness is like oil in an engine. Without it, everything grinds to a halt." Jacob let the words settle, his respect for the mechanic growing. By mid-afternoon, Owen had diagnosed the issue with Jacob's car and laid out a plan for the repairs. "You've got a few options," Owen said. "It's not an emergency, but you'll want to take care of it soon." Jacob listened carefully, appreciating the straightforward advice. "I'll leave it with you. It's clear you know what you're doing." As he prepared to leave, Jacob hesitated. "You know, I met Angela Grant yesterday," he said casually. Owen raised an eyebrow. "Yeah? She's a good person." "She is," Jacob agreed. "And she couldn't stop talking about what you did for her. You didn't charge her a dime." Owen shrugged again, this time with a small smile. "She needed help. That's all there was to it." Jacob studied him for a moment, sensing there was more to the story. "What made you that way?" he asked. Owen paused, leaning against the workbench. "I guess it's because I've been on the other side of it. Years ago, when I didn't have much, someone helped me. They didn't ask for anything in return, they just wanted me to get back on my feet. I've never forgotten that." Jacob nodded slowly, something thoughtful crossing his face. "It's rare, Owen. What you're doing here, it matters. More than you might realize." Owen scratched the back of his neck, uncomfortable with the praise. "I'm just doing what feels right." Jacob smiled faintly. "Maybe. But people like you deserve more recognition than you get. I'll see you soon, Owen." With that, he climbed into a rental car he'd had delivered and drove away, leaving Owen wondering what the stranger was really thinking. What Owen didn't know was that Jacob wasn't just any visitor passing through Maplewood. He was a man with influence and resources, and he had every intention of using them to repay Owen's quiet generosity in a way the mechanic never saw coming. Over the next few days, Jacob kept a low profile in Maplewood, observing the town and learning more about Owen. The stories he uncovered painted a clear picture. Owen wasn't just a mechanic, he was a cornerstone of the community. A teenager at the diner told Jacob about how Owen had fixed his bike when it broke on the way to school. A single mother at the grocery store shared how Owen had helped her with her car, much like Angela, without asking for payment. Even the elderly woman next door to Owen's shop mentioned how he'd shoveled her driveway during a harsh winter storm. "He never asks for anything," she said with a fond smile. "Owen just believes in helping where he can." Jacob was inspired, but also struck by the modesty of Owen's operation. The garage was well loved but clearly stretched thin. The tools were old, the equipment outdated, and the building itself in need of repair. Yet Owen carried on, pouring everything he had into helping others. One morning, Jacob returned to Owen's shop, carrying 2 cups of coffee. He found the mechanic under the hood of an old truck, the sound of a ratchet echoing through the space. "Thought you might need this," Jacob said, setting a cup on the workbench. Owen straightened, surprised but appreciative. "Thanks." Jacob leaned against the counter, sipping his coffee. "I've been thinking about what you said the other day about the person who helped you when you were down. You ever think about how much you've done for this town?" Owen raised an eyebrow, wiping his hands on a rag. "I'm just fixing cars, Jacob. It's not exactly world-changing." Jacob shook his head. "You're wrong. It's bigger than you think. What you're doing here, it's not just about cars. It's about keeping people going, giving them hope. You've built something special, Owen, even if you don't see it." Owen shrugged, clearly uncomfortable with the praise. "I don't do it for recognition. I just like seeing people get back on their feet." Jacob smiled knowingly. "Well, sometimes good people deserve a little help too." That afternoon, Jacob made a few calls. As an investor, he had access to resources that could transform Owen's garage into something more. He contacted suppliers, mechanics he'd worked with in the past, and even a few local businesses in Maplewood, laying the groundwork for what he envisioned. By the end of the week, his plan was in motion. The following Saturday, Owen stepped outside his shop to find a small crowd gathered in the lot. Angela was there with Mia, holding a tray of muffins. The teenager from the diner stood next to his shiny repaired bike, and the elderly woman who lived nearby leaned on her cane, her smile bright despite her frailty. "What's all this?" Owen asked, looking around in confusion. Jacob stepped forward, a grin spreading across his face. "It's for you, Owen. For me." Jacob gestured to the group. "Everyone here has a story about how you've helped them. Fixing bikes, repairing cars, shoveling driveways. You've been there for this town in ways most people wouldn't. And now it's time for us to do something for you." Owen frowned, clearly puzzled. "I don't understand." Jacob nodded toward the back of the lot, where several delivery trucks were pulling in. One carried brand new tools and equipment, another fresh paint and supplies to renovate the garage, and a third bore a new sign: "Bennett's Garage, where kindness fuels the community." Owen stared, stunned. "We've upgraded your shop," Jacob explained. "New tools, better equipment, and a fresh coat of paint. But that's not all. We've also set up a fund to help cover costs for people who can't afford repairs. It's called the Owen Bennett Community Fund." Owen blinked, his throat tightening as he looked at the crowd, then back at Jacob. "Why would you do all this?" Jacob stepped closer, his voice steady. "Because the world needs more people like you, Owen. And because kindness deserves to be rewarded." For a moment, Owen was silent, his rough hands trembling as he rubbed the back of his neck. Finally, he managed a gruff, "I don't know what to say." "Say thank you," Angela chimed in, her smile soft. Owen chuckled, his voice thick with emotion. "Thank you, to all of you." The crowd erupted into cheers, and Owen found himself surrounded by people shaking his hand, clapping him on the back, and sharing stories of the countless ways he'd touched their lives. For the first time in years, Owen allowed himself to feel the full weight of what he'd built: not just a garage, but a community bound together by kindness. The transformation of Bennett's Garage took shape over the next few weeks. The once faded sign was replaced with a sleek new one, its bold letters proudly proclaiming the garage's role as a cornerstone of Maplewood. Inside, fresh paint brightened the walls, and the upgraded equipment made Owen's work more efficient than ever. What struck Owen most wasn't just the physical changes, but the outpouring of support from the community. People stopped by to lend a hand, drop off meals, or simply thank him for what he'd done over the years. Even the fund Jacob had established began to grow, thanks to contributions from local businesses and individuals who believed in Owen's mission. One afternoon, as Owen stood in his newly refurbished shop, Jacob arrived with a clipboard and a mischievous grin. "You're not here to drop off another surprise, are you?" Owen asked, crossing his arms. "Not quite," Jacob replied, handing him the clipboard. "This is your schedule for next week. I've started sending some of my own contacts your way, people who could use a trustworthy mechanic. They'll pay full price, of course. It's about time you started getting the business you deserve." Owen glanced at the schedule, his brow furrowing. "Jacob, I appreciate what you've done, but I'm not sure I can handle this much attention." Jacob clapped him on the shoulder. "You've already been handling it, Owen. The only difference now is that more people are seeing what you're capable of. Besides, with the new equipment, you'll be unstoppable." Owen chuckled despite himself. "I guess I can't argue with that." As the days turned into weeks, Bennett's garage became busier than ever. Cars lined the lot, from locals in need of quick repairs to out-of-towners who had heard about the shop's reputation. True to his word, Owen continued to offer help to those who couldn't pay, but the steady stream of paying customers ensured the shop's stability. Jacob, meanwhile, became a regular fixture at the garage. Despite his polished appearance, he didn't shy away from rolling up his sleeves and helping when needed, whether it was organizing paperwork or fetching tools. The two men formed an easy camaraderie, built on mutual respect and a shared belief in the power of kindness. "You know," Owen said one day as they worked side by side, "I wasn't sure what to make of you when you first showed up. But I think you're all right, Jacob." Jacob laughed. "I'll take that as high praise coming from you." Owen smirked. "Don't let it go to your head." The ripple effect of Owen's generosity began to extend far beyond Maplewood. Jacob's connections brought attention to the garage's unique mission, and before long, media outlets began to take notice. A feature article in a regional newspaper dubbed Owen the Mechanic with a heart of gold, and the story spread like wildfire. Donations poured into the community fund, allowing Owen to expand its reach. He started offering free workshops for teenagers interested in learning basic car maintenance, giving them skills and confidence they could carry into adulthood. One of the workshop attendees was Lucas, a bright-eyed 15-year-old who reminded Owen of himself at that age. Lucas had a knack for engines and quickly became Owen's unofficial apprentice, soaking up everything the mechanic taught him. "You've got a gift," Kid Owen said one afternoon as they worked on an old motorcycle. "Stick with it, and you'll be running your own shop someday." Lucas beamed. "Only if I can be half as good as you, Mr. Bennett." One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting a warm glow over the town, Jacob and Owen sat outside the garage, sharing a quiet moment. "You've done something incredible here," Jacob said, gazing at the bustling shop. Owen took a sip of his coffee, his gaze steady. "Couldn't have done it without you, Jacob. Or without this town." Jacob shook his head. "All I did was shine a light on what you were already doing. The rest was all you." Owen smiled faintly, his expression contemplative. "You know, I used to think fixing cars was all I had to offer, but seeing how things have changed, it makes me think there's more I can do." "There is," Jacob said confidently. "And you're just getting started." As they sat together, watching the lights of the garage flicker on, Owen felt something he hadn't allowed himself to feel in years: pride, not just in his work, but in the community he'd helped build. Kindness, he realized, wasn't just a gesture. It was a force that could transform lives, including his own. Months passed, and Bennett's garage thrived not just as a business, but as a hub of community connection. The workshops continued to grow in popularity, with Owen welcoming students of all ages. On any given afternoon, the shop buzzed with activity: teens learning the basics of car repair, adults dropping off vehicles, and neighbors stopping by just to say hello. Jacob remained a steady presence, offering advice when needed and keeping the community fund flourishing. His business acumen and connections allowed the fund to expand, supporting not only repairs but also transportation for families in emergencies. One day, Angela arrived at the garage with Mia in tow. The little girl darted ahead, holding a bright poster she'd made at school. "Mr. Bennett," Mia called, her voice filled with excitement. "Look at what I made." Owen crouched to examine the poster. It was a colorful drawing of the garage, complete with smiling faces and a big heart above the sign. At the bottom, in wobbly handwriting, Mia had written, "Thank you for helping my mom and everyone else." Owen's throat tightened as he looked at her beaming face. "This is incredible, Mia. I think we need to frame it and put it right here in the shop." "Really?" she asked, her eyes wide with delight. "Absolutely," Owen said, ruffling her hair. Angela watched the exchange with a grateful smile. "You've made such a difference here, Owen. I don't know where we'd all be without you." Owen shook his head, his voice humble. "It's not just me. It's this town, it's people like you and Jacob. We've all built this together." That evening, as Owen closed up the garage, he noticed Jacob waiting outside with a thoughtful expression. "Something on your mind?" Owen asked as he locked the door. Jacob hesitated for a moment before speaking. "I've been thinking about what's next. For me." Owen leaned against the doorframe, curious. "What do you mean?" "I've spent so much of my life chasing success," Jacob said, his voice reflective. "But being here, seeing what you've built, it's made me realize that success isn't about numbers or deals. It's about impact. About leaving something meaningful behind." Owen nodded, sensing the weight of Jacob's words. "So what are you planning to do about it?" Jacob smiled, a spark of determination in his eyes. "I want to stay. Not just for a few weeks, but for good. There's something here in Maplewood, something real. And I want to be part of it." Owen chuckled, clapping him on the shoulder. "Looks like we've got ourselves another Maplewood local." The news of Jacob's decision spread quickly, and the town welcomed him with open arms. He bought a small house near the park and began working closely with Owen, not just as a partner in the garage's success, but as a friend deeply invested in the community's future. Together, they launched new initiatives, a mentorship program for young adults, a scholarship fund for trade schools, and even an annual festival to celebrate the town's spirit. The festival, held in the newly renovated town square, became a symbol of everything Maplewood had become. Families gathered to enjoy music, food, and games, while booths showcased local talent and shared stories of kindness that had rippled through the community. At the center of it all was Owen, standing with Jacob by his side. As the sun set over the square, Owen glanced around at the laughter and light, his heart full. "You know," he said to Jacob, "if someone had told me a year ago this is where I'd be, I wouldn't have believed them." Jacob grinned. "Funny how kindness works, isn't it? You start with one small act, and suddenly you've got an entire town changed because of it." Owen nodded, his gaze soft. "It's not about what you do. It's about why you do it. And I think we found our why." The two men stood quietly as the festival continued around them, content in the knowledge that their work wasn't just about fixing cars or funding programs. It was about building a legacy, a reminder that in a world often driven by self-interest, kindness could still be the strongest force of all. And in Maplewood, that kindness would continue to thrive, one small act at a time.